welcome to the Guam Legislature. Senator Respicio, thank you very much for joining me this morning. We're here because there's been a conference, actually, or the 6th Nonprofit Congress is being held here in Guam for about 2 to 3 days. And in their conference, of course, I know we've been sponsoring this for the last, I think, 3 years, 6 years. Whoa, not bad, 6 years. And I know that always after the your meetings that you would actually come to the legislature and make a presentation to the legislature in terms of possible policies that the legislature, could take into consideration. So this morning, I know you've brought with you different individuals from the different islands and countries and territories. And so before we start, I'm going to ask you, Sarah, if you can introduce those who have joined you this morning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of PZUTA and the Pacific Coalition of Nonprofit Leaders, we'd like to thank the Guam Legislature for again welcoming us to the legislature and being receptive to the recommendations for policy that we bring forth to you every year. And yes, we do try to make arrangements immediately after our nonprofit congress so that you can be kept abreast of what are some of the major issues that the nonprofit sector and the civil society organizations, not only in Guam and in the region, have to present to you for your consideration. It's especially gratifying for us that you, Madam Speaker, would be here today with Senator Rory Respicio with your extensive background and commitment to Micronesia through your work on the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures. So I want to acknowledge your liaison, your partnership with many of our brothers and sisters, not only here on Guam and the CNMI, but in the Republic of Palau, Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, and of course American Samoa, Hawaii, and Kiribati and Nauru, who are also members of APIL. And we look forward to joining you at the APIL General Assembly in June this year here on Guam, and we would be more than happy to partner with you on any activities that you feel might be appropriate and helpful to the delegates in understanding the quest and the issues of the CSO and nonprofit sectors. I'm very pleased to introduce to you today those that are with us in this presentation. And I'd like to start by acknowledging our executive committee for PZUTA. To my right is Teresa Areola. She's our vice chair and the executive director of Sanctuary Incorporated. And to her right is Marie Leongro, who's the operations manager for ICANN Resources. And next to her is Lonnie Vakatali, who's an attorney with the Pacific Islands Association of Non-Governmental Organizations based in Suva, Fiji, of which PZUTA is a member of Piango and also the representative for Micronesia currently. Before I go to Cindy, I'll go to, on my far left is Sam Ilisugam. He is the current secretary for PZUTA and the executive director for Gumamami Incorporated. Going back to my far right, excuse me for jumping around. Did I say you were secretary or treasurer? I did say treasurer, okay. So my far right is Cindy Mori, and she comes from the state of Chuuk, and she's been very active with us over the years and is involved with the Chamber of Commerce there, as well as with the Chuuk Women's Council. To my left, dear friend and colleague Ann Singyo from Ibil Society, and currently also helping WestCare establish a youth program in the Republic of Palau. Joining us from the U.S. mainland is Gregory Sandana, and Gregory is the current executive director of APALA, the Asian Pacific Americans Labor Alliance. He's also the immediate past chair for NCAPA, the National Council for Asian Pacific Americans. Did I say that right? NCAPA, the National Council for Asian Pacific Americans. So we're very happy to have Gregory here. This is his first adult visit to Guam, and so we welcome him and hope for a very long relationship with both APALA and NCAPA. And to his left is a commissioner from the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, or the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans Pacific Islanders. And as you know, Mary Okada is the vice chair for that commission. And so we're very pleased that now we have another ambassador for the Pacific region, and Micronesia specifically, and to go forward and bring our issues to the highest level of government in Washington, D.C. So we know he's got work to do when he gets back home. Thank you, Jake. What did I call him? Jake? Did I say Jake? Oh, I didn't say your name. Okay. Jake, can you help me pronounce your last name? Okay. Okay. And we also have our staff from WestCare, Tricia Adkins, Bella Fagota, John Bloss, and of course our friend and colleague back there, you might know her. Okay. Are there any questions before we begin, Madam Speaker, Senator Respicio?
No, I just wanted to maybe know how we wanted to do this. Is for everyone maybe to just go down the line and make a presentation, or do you want question and answers after every individual or at the very end?
Well, if I could please, I'll go over the resolutions in general, and then ask all of the members if they'd like to contribute further or expand on any of these.
Okay.
And then we'd like to, of course, encourage or suggest any dialogue from or questions from you.
So
and
just
Senator.
maybe then more housekeeping here, just in case, is that, well, first of all, if you need extra copies to be made, you can give it to our staff, and we'll make some copies of whatever you have if you want to share or distribute. The other is for those of you who are going to speak into the mic, you'll notice that first of all you need to press the button. The red light will be on. You do not need to bring it up too close. It'll be, your voices will be muffled. It picks up your voice very well. I mean, don't keep it too far either. Don't be afraid of it. But as soon as you start to hear your voice being muffled, then you know you're too close. So, and most of the time we like to keep all the others off while one is speaking, because once in a while we get some interference. So, okay, so that's basically it. And yes, and before we open your right, I'd like to also at the same time acknowledge my colleague who, yes, you've mentioned that earlier, has been with me with APIL, and he's definitely the chair for Micronesian Affairs as well. Senator Respicio, if you have any comments or questions.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. You always do an excellent job at welcoming many individuals and groups to the legislature. And before Sarah and this group makes their presentation on some of the policies that the legislature should consider, I want to give this group an opportunity to just kind of summarize what policies you've recommended over the last 6 years, and how the legislature over the last 6 years, particularly under Speaker Wampat's leadership, have been very receptive to those policies where it was translated into resolutions or actually bills which became law. The one thing that comes to my mind is the very strong position that Pazuta has taken with respect to bullying in the schools. And Sarah, I'm glad you recognized Jolene, and it's why I asked her to be here, because that's a perennial problem facing that demographic. And Speaker Wampat has held numerous roundtable meetings, and I remember this council taking a very strong policy recommendation that there has to be some meaningful public-private partnerships to addressing this bullying problem, among other problems facing our youth in our island. And so, Madam Speaker, I just want to give Sarah an opportunity to just summarize some of the things that you've recommended over the years and how that's actually translated to meaningful policies that have translated to tangible results over the years. And so if we move forward in that kind of construct, then I think our people listening will be very encouraged that the recommendations you're going to present as a result of your 6th nonprofit Congress gathering, that thing is actually going to translate into some meaningful action, and you have a receptive legislature to recognize those recommendations. So is that okay, Madam Speaker? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. To summarize the key recommendations that have come from the Nonprofit Congress over the years, I don't have a summary or an analysis of that, but it certainly is one that I would like to work with your APIL office and even maybe with your staff to assess where exactly we are with that. But the primary pieces that have gone forward and have gone out loud and clear, as you said, Senator Respicio, is efforts to prevent bullying in the schools and in the community, especially of the most vulnerable, such as young people, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. So those are that has been brought forward, and I believe there's been serious consideration, and I know several of the members of APIL as well have come to us and asked us for specific recommendations. We've also presented to this legislature and to APIL the issues of strengthening and updating the child abuse laws. And there are some places within the APIL membership jurisdictions that do not have these laws in place, and certainly Guam is in a position, as well as the CNMI, to update and to be more current in terms of the approaches and models of intervention and support for victims of child abuse. The other one that goes alongside with that is domestic violence. And again, the domestic violence policies that either need to be enacted or strengthened on Guam and in the various jurisdictions also serve to prevent the onset in some cases or the expansion of human trafficking cases in our region. And that's a very important issue that we in the region are very concerned about, given our vulnerability to international human traffickers with our close proximity to Asia and with the predicted or projected influx of different persons coming to our islands from around the world for various reasons. So domestic violence and human trafficking prevention strategies. The drug and alcohol problem continues to rise here on Guam and in our island, and the discussion regarding the need for the local governments to help support the efforts by the nonprofits and the CSOs and the various health departments throughout Guam and the CNMI and Micronesia, again, to be on the top of our agenda this year. There's a increased need for capacity building so that we have more persons who are trained and certified in the field of substance abuse counseling. Currently on Guam, we have about 20, and that does not suffice for the numbers that we really have. We were advised in one of our work sessions earlier this week that focused specifically on substance abuse that Guam really should have about 80. So we're far below what that is. And there are some efforts at the Guam Community College, so we laud Dr. Okada and Peter Roberto in trying to establish these training programs there. But there's much more that needs to be done to help build capacity in this area in the work of prevention as well as treatment. And and Senator Respicio, I know you particularly are aware that about 10, 12 years ago, there was legislation passed to help to stimulate the development of residential treatment programs on Guam. So there was about $1 million that was appropriated by the Guam legislature to help develop and support residential treatment for youth, for women, and for men. So 3 specific programs. That has not increased, and it's been about 12 years. And unfortunately, the number of substance abuse counselors has not increased since then, nor the expansion. But yet the problems that we see on Guam, and I don't think a week goes by where you don't see evidence that there are some very serious problems with alcohol and with ICE here on Guam. And the reports that we have gotten this week from around our region is that there are similar levels of, or the incidences of these drugs and alcohol cases are just as evident in the other islands. So we're looking at a regional plan to address this. There's been some initiative from the government, but as you know, coming from the nonprofit sector and the civil society organizations, you know, we also share a perspective that I think is representative of the people that we serve and what those needs are. So we'd like to really continue the strong dialogue with the Guam legislature, with the members of APIL, and one of the recommendations that also came forth in the resolution review yesterday was that we really need to have a plan to have meetings, and even if we have Skype meetings, you know, because now technology provides us opportunities where we can have greater participation of our various members. So if we set up a meeting with Congresswoman Berdallo, for example, then whoever is able to go to Washington can be there, but the other members can also participate as well. We're definitely going to explore ways in which we can bring our message to other venues, and we're going to have that discussion further with Jake and Gregory, who are here today. We believe that we'll be able to accomplish that. And so, again, whenever you go to any of your various regional or international or national forums, we'd like to serve as consult to you in any of these issues. So that's a general summary of some of the things that have been passed. I'd like to also open it up to those members from the Pacific Coalition who have been involved with us over the years and have come to APIL meetings or have worked with you here at the Guam Legislature, if I have missed anything or want to expand on anything. But before I do that, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of one of our Pacific Coalition members, the chair of MANGO, which is the Marianas Alliance for NGOs, John Gonzalez. And he is joined by Francis Sablon. Also from MANGO. And I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Vivian Thomas, who has served as a consult every now and then to Pazuta and supported us in many of our activities. Dr. Thomas, thank you for joining us. And Kois Rudolph, he is a member of our board of directors, and he is with the FSM Church Leaders Association. Thank you, Kois. Okay, so is there senators or does anyone have any other contributions to my general statements regarding what has been done or accomplished so far?
Well, thank you, Sarah, and Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving this group an opportunity to take an inventory and take stock of what prior policy recommendations you've made over the last 5 years, and this is the 6th year, and what has been done as a result of those recommendations. Sir, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I have confidence in your leadership and your ability to just recall all of the accomplishments, and we wanted to give that opportunity to you so we can. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. So I know because you're also on a tight schedule as well, and we want to give you the opportunity to go through your resolutions, your recommendations, because my understanding is that we're looking at 34 of them. So, and there might be some comments in between. So you may proceed then.
This draft is is available now to those that are present here, and as Madam Speaker, you noted there are 34, but this is our draft, and I'm sure after we do the work on it to tweak this afternoon, it'll be probably a smaller number. But what I'd like to do is just do an overview of what those are and not necessarily go through each one. I think most important, the resolutions that really, I think, came out as being, critical, important, urgent, that were passed, and are several of these. But before I get to that, I do want to note the activities that came about to develop these. And the first was on Tuesday. We had a pre-conference workshop. And those pre-conference workshops were facilitated by Gregory Sandana from Apala and Kappa, and also Henry Ocampo, who is the Senior Program Analyst for the Office of Minority Health Resource Center. So the two of them facilitated a discussion that looked at some of these resolutions that were brought forward. The second day, which was Wednesday, we had a series of best practice showcases and community discussions. And what that was we highlighted those areas and those programs that have been reported to be effective in our work with our people directly. And so these entities shared what approaches they saw were doing quite well, and also initiated discussion about what the gaps and barriers were in working with those particular populations. So for the first session, it was held at ICANN Resources and hosted by ICANN and Gumamami. And there were a couple of other nonprofits and governmental entities that presented there as well. So the focus was on persons with disabilities. The second was a focus on youth, and it was held at Sanctuary. And Sanctuary was joined by the Micronesian Youth Service Network. They were joined by the FSM Church Leader Association, Guam Foster Families Association, and West Care's Project Isata, which is our youth component. And then it was followed by a discussion that focused on veterans and homelessness. And it was hosted by West Care Pacific Islands. And we were joined by the Guam Homeless Coalition. The last one was held at the Salvation Army in Tizan. And the focus was on behavioral health and substance abuse. So there was focal points, there was targeted discussion on those areas: disabilities, youth, veterans, homelessness, and substance abuse and behavioral health. And then, of course, yesterday, thank you again for joining us at the opening ceremonies for the 6th Nonprofit Congress. And so from those sessions, as well as the afternoon sessions where we had skill building and capacity building workshops in fund development, in governance, and in financial management of projects, additional resolutions and recommendations were brought forth. So that's just a backdrop on how these came about. And we had approximately 90 individuals that were at the session yesterday, and approximately, I would say, 40 people that stayed with going to the various workshops and discussions. So now moving over to the specific resolutions that we wanted to bring forward is there seems to be a great need to help stimulate and educate our private business sector and even our governmental sector in terms of creating an environment that would be conducive to persons with disabilities and again persons who are veterans. Those two groups seem to have continued difficulty in not only finding and identifying but sustaining permanent employment. And without having permanent employment, the probability of them being homeless is much greater. And so in a broader mission of trying to avoid homelessness, and to of course build self-esteem and the satisfaction of having your own income and having your own home, it's necessary for us to encourage employability for those that can maintain employment. So finding and supporting employers who will hire on a training basis and a permanent basis veterans as well as persons with disability. There is a lively discussion and strong recommendation regarding reevaluating the compulsory school age. Right now it's 16, and because it's at 16, there have been reports, not only through this past week, but in the last few years, a number of reports about what is it that we can do to help encourage these young people from not dropping out of school, because 16 is the age in which they are required by law to stay in school. And so it becomes often an easy out for complicated cases where the young person is attracted to dropping out of school, or the home may encourage dropping out of school because there are too many complicated situations or conditions for that child. And so our experience and observation as youth service providers is it doesn't work, because if they do drop out, the chances of them getting back on the road to graduating from high school and going on to college or vocational training is decreased. So getting them while they're still 16 and having them stay in school is a strategy for a number of different social issues that we're presently confronted with in our socioeconomic sustainability plans, right? Is to get these young people to, in fact, complete high school and pursue college or vocational training, and to identify whatever behavioral health issues that they might have, so that they have a better chance of being successful as adults and contributing members to their families and to our community. So that the idea again of looking at or reevaluating, certainly just having the discussion, I think is going to generate some thought about what it is that we can do to deal with the dropouts. Those that choose to drop out or are kicked out of school or encouraged to leave school at age 16. The veterans issues, and again connected to the number of those that are becoming homeless. We reported last year in the point-in-time count that there were 29 homeless veterans identified. And this year, the preliminary data shows that there were 21 homeless veterans. And this is, part of approximately, Sam, I don't know if you remember the number, but I believe the preliminary data shows about 1,500 persons in the point-in-time count of 2016 that was held on the last Friday of January. And so there's in order for the veterans who are homeless out there to really to really move forward into permanent housing and stability. The identification of an expanded substance abuse treatment programs has been identified, as well as behavioral health, because they're inadequate right now, and there are some veterans who are not eligible for federal Veteran Administration services because they have a criminal background, or they may have been discharged with a dishonorable, which would disqualify them. And so there still are people, they're still here, they're still in our roles. What is it that we can do from the local government and the local community perspective? How can we round everybody up to embrace these veterans and their families so that they can move forward and progress in their lives? So there are several of recommendations that are around that area. We've already discussed the need for drug and alcohol residential treatment programs, not only for veterans but for all of our different populations, which has been underfunded, and the number of counselors grossly insufficient to meet our needs, not only in Guam but around the region. One of the, I think, strong recommendations that were made was to find the vehicle for increased behavioral health services in the schools. And it is not enough to have teachers and counselors who are already overworked to also be expected, and they're mandated to report child abuse, but more often, that's an additional responsibility to go a step further and to provide referral assistance, and not all of them are trained in this area. So the recommendation is, how is it that we can get more behavioral health programs right in the schools where you have a captive audience, where you have people who are trained to identify signs of abuse or neglect, where young people can go, as well as staff and faculty, to get consultation on some of the observations. I mean, I don't know how many times we read in the newspaper that there has been a child who is 13, 14, 15, 16 who has been a victim of abuse and neglect, and they will report that they have been victims since they were 4, 5, 6 years old, and it was not identified, and so they suffered unnecessarily for many years. So we want to be able to provide support, as well as early identification of behavioral health issues. We know now that we can identify behavioral health issues, illness in a child as early as 12 to 14. So it's not like 20 years ago when we thought, you have to be a full-grown adult in order to identify if there's a mental illness or behavioral health issue. They can be found quite early, and there would be such a significant savings in the cost to that child in terms of their dignity, in terms of their confidence and their safety and well-being, if the early identification of these issues could be identified much sooner. So the recommendation is behavioral health in the schools. Child care and transportation. Those are the two most reported reasons why persons don't participate in programs, supported programs, is they don't have child care and they don't have transportation. And this is again recommended. This is nothing new. It's been the issues that preclude people from participating in recovery programs and treatment programs and support programs. So we encourage ways in which we can make sure that those features are in all of our programs, both government and non-governmental. I think what was really resounding in this past couple of days is the need for us to have greater collaboration and a presence at local, national, and international forums. I know, Madam Speaker and Senator Respicio, that you are aware of some of these national, international groups like the Pacific Islands Forums, the Pacific Islands Development Forum, and there's just a number of those. And it has been our observation as NGOs and civil society organizations that oftentimes we're not asked to be at the table, or when we are asked to be at the table, we're not there. And so we want to, from our end, we're making or recommitting ourselves to be much more aggressive about being at the table. And you know, certainly our acceptance as a sister organization to APIL speaks of the receptiveness by our policymakers in the Micronesian region in doing so. But there are many others that we have yet to accomplish that. And for example, at the Pacific Islands Development Forum, they do have a table for all of the entities that are here today. However, not all of those tables are filled. And even though we have CSO representation, it is important, or it's currently the process that government, the chief executives, identify who should sit on that table from the business sector, the CSO sector, and the government sector. So those three are available, and we ask that our leadership continue to support the full representation of all of our entities at these forums and summits. And we certainly, as CSOs and NGOs, will continue to assert ourselves, because we believe that we bring a perspective to the table that may not be present if we weren't there to share the voices and concerns of our grassroots. Healthcare, I know this is something very close to many of us, or should I say the lack of healthcare in our region. There are certainly many health disparities here, and we have often not gotten the ear of the federal government in this area in terms of expansion of healthcare. And we know that we don't have the numbers. We hear this all the time. And as a strategy, Madam Chair, we know that you've brought forward the idea through APIL of, if we all came together, we can have the numbers to justify, you know, health care for everyone, and perhaps to attract more entities to come and provide service to us. So in support of that, we've also adopted, and I believe we did in the last two nonprofit Congress as well. So we want to continue to work with you and partner with you on that, because we know it's really critical, and it's even more evident that we need to work this out with the recent judgments that have been passed in Hawaii regarding the inclusion of our FAS residents in Hawaii state health programs. Regional transportation. This is not a new issue to Guam, to APIL, to the Nonprofit Congress, or any other entity. It's a constant area, and we don't want to throw this off our agenda. We want to keep it on the forefront, because we understand that in order for us to really fully experience socioeconomic sustainability, we're going to have to improve our air and sea transportation, and we need to connect. So we again put this forward to you. Most of the additional recommendations, I believe, are those that would necessitate further thought about putting them together, because they're internal infrastructural types of items, such as ways in which we can promote the nonprofit sector and civil society, and come up with templates to help promote that, and help communities and policymakers understand the value of the nonprofits and the CSOs, and ways in which we can improve our marketing, our media, and our relationships with government. So I believe at this point that would conclude the summary of those resolutions that were adopted, but I certainly yield to my colleagues at the table if they would like to add or expand to those that I have presented. Thank you, Madam Speaker and Senator Respicio.
Thank you. So it's Therese?
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Senator Respicio. I think it's fitting at this point. Sarah first started an opening of some of the ways that we have been achieving better collaboration with our policymakers. And one of those is the bullying efforts that has been happening in the schools. And so for the sake of everyone present, since this is the Pacific Coalition, I would like to highlight Guam's success in bullying effort. And we're happy to have in the audience Jolene Respicio, who has been the forefront of the bullying effort through the judiciary. And so I think it's if everyone could, I think it's best that Jolene might do a summary on how this has translated in the in Guam for efforts of possibly bringing this effort to Micronesia, because I think it's best practices. We all should be able to share what works in our islands, and then be able to customize as possible these best practices. So, as Sarah mentioned, some of the efforts that came about previous collaborations, I think it's best that we share that today, if everyone's okay. Because as the executive director of Sanctuary, there are certain key points that are highlighted with me, to me for our organization. Sarah mentioned some of them, like substance abuse counseling not being effort. And our clients that come into our doors, we deal with all kinds of things. The idea of revisiting the dropout age at 16. All these things, we expect our kids to do well, but yet we give them the out to leave us sooner than later. And so a lot of the things that come into play with our clients at Sanctuary are behavioral issues that we've touched, are disciplinary issues, and just the lack of respect of other people. And so I think that's where bullying comes into play, and I would really like to highlight those successes in Guam, so perhaps our colleagues in the Pacific who are around the table today can see and perhaps see those kinds of programs work in their jurisdiction, in their countries. So if it's okay, I would like to open it up to Ms. Respicio. Mrs. Respicio.
Can I just do a disclaimer here, Madam Speaker? I didn't know that she was going to do this, so I know
Sorry,
that she's
am I putting-
capable of doing a presentation, but just so I can be able to go home after work.
Oh, sorry. It's about sharing, so. Sorry about that, Jolene.
Madam Speaker and Senator Respicio, while Jolene Respicio was preparing herself, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of a couple of other people that walked in, if I may. WestCare's Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Maurice Lee, is not a stranger to many of you. He again joins us as a key sponsor and supporter of Pazuta and the work that we've done over the years with the Pacific Coalition. So welcome, Maurice.
Welcome.
And he's joined by our lead veteran advocate for our supportive services for veteran families, Mr. Danny Duenas.
Welcome.
And Sandra Badallo, who is heads our new, when I say us, our WestCare's new Healthy Marriages and Relationship Education Program. So Sandra Badallo. Thank you, Sandra and Dan.
Welcome, Sandra. Okay, Jolene.
Hi, good morning. Yes, this is quite a surprise, and I certainly don't mind because it's nice to be, again, a part of a collaborative effort. From the Judiciary of Guam, of course, we have been doing this for many years, and we're very proud of many of these successes that Therese mentioned. And so, of course, I'd be remiss if I don't also mention that we work in partnership, we work hand in hand with the Guam Department of Education through their federal programs, and through those federal funding, through some additional federal funding, we work to provide outreach and educational training, specifically with law-related education. And so bullying, anti-bullying efforts fall under that umbrella. And the main thing with the programs that we provide to the students, as well as, of course, school staff, the most important element, our foundation, everything, the cornerstone of every educational outreach program that we provide is based on the Golden Rule. And so the Golden Rule, sorry, is it too close? Okay. So the Golden Rule is, I can't hear myself speak, it's okay? Okay. So, as you know, the Golden Rule is to treat others the way that you would like to be treated. And so we really try and always focus and have every educational opportunity to remind not just students, but of course, every individual, every citizen, that, that is how we should be carrying ourselves in our daily lives. And so it's just a constant reminder to each of us to follow the Golden Rule. And that's a part of our anti-bullying program under do unto others. And then, of course, we have several programs. We use only evidence-based programs and strategies. And in the schools, we have several in both the public as well as the private schools here on island. And one of our foremost programs, as you're likely very aware of, that we did also a presentation in Palau last year, that was also a Youth Congress time, right? A nonprofit Congress. So Play by the Rules is a wonderful national project that Guam is very pleased to be one of the jurisdictions that provide this program to its students, primarily in the middle school. But Play by the Rules is basically a program that teaches students through a very interactive lesson plan about the Guam laws that affect them as youth. So it's specific to youth and consequences for not following them. And the program, because it's so interactive, the students take very, very well to the lessons. And so that's one program. And another very successful program, which is a little bit more recent, Play by the Rules, we first implemented back in 2008. And as a matter of fact, we're getting ready any day now to also have the second edition of Play by the Rules ready. And we're very proud of that, so that should be hopefully printed within the next month or so. And to mention also, I may as well just throw in there while I'm talking about Play by the Rules, we are also currently working on translating Play by the Rules into Chukis, the Chukis language. So that is one of the affected populations in the schools, and so we felt that would be a good addition at this time, at least for the first pilot attempt at a translation into another language. So then secondly, again, moving on to another really good evidence-based program is the Safe School Ambassadors program. It's a youth empowerment program. It's youth-driven, student-driven. We basically identify like 40 we prefer to use it at the secondary level, the middle and high school level, because of the way the program works. It certainly works with elementary school students, but we have another program for that. And so the Safe School Ambassadors program identifies the school teachers and leaders, and even some of the students they nominate through nomination. We identify 40 per year students who are like the alpha leaders, the influential leaders, those that are socially influential amongst their peers. And so what we do is we put them into a training, and they then we teach them skills, reasoning skills, balancing skills, intervention skills, so that they can actually safely, help prevent or even intervene amongst their peers. And so we found that to be very powerful. of a program in the schools. And so we hope to continue to also expand that into a lot of the other public schools. I know that the superintendent, John Fernandez, is so pleased with the program, and we're able to try and, again, expand it further into more of the public schools. At this time, nearly all of the Catholic schools have been trained in it and will continue to train later this October. And then the other program that we use is the Oveas Bullying Prevention Program. Again, this one is one of the most recognized, foremost evidence-based practices in the world that's very well known and widely used. And we use this primarily here on Guam in the elementary schools. All the local Guam public schools, the DOE schools, have been trained, the elementary schools. And so they use, of course, elements of that. And then the private schools, at this time, I believe, all of the private elementary schools, they're elementary middle. So the Catholic schools have all been trained in that as well. And so the students take very well to those lessons. And as a matter of fact, they really, really look forward to their class meetings, which is typically about once a week, where they have 20, 25 minutes with their teachers and go through lessons on bullying related matters, and not even just specific only to bullying, but team building skills. It helps them all develop cooperation, to find commonalities with their diverse groups, and their amongst students and their peers. And so again, these are some of the programs that we have very proudly and successfully implemented across the island in the schools. And so we hope to also at any time be able to share some of these best practices with the other islands. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jolene. I know that you've mentioned 3 different programs, but is there by any chance that you might have extra copies that everyone can take one? Not everyone, but each entity can probably take a copy of, like, play by the rules. I think that might be very helpful.
I know, because we're at the end of we were really running out, because we're again getting ready to print the 2nd edition. I will definitely try and find if I can see at least a few copies. Maybe we can but I'd be happy to, if you can tell me how many islands there are, I'd be happy to see if we can have some of those copies, because it definitely is something we would want to hopefully emulate in the other islands too.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for suggesting that, Madam Speaker. And Jolene, we'll be at the Holiday Resort all afternoon till like 6 o'clock if someone can bring those. Otherwise, please feel free to just send to Teresa and myself, and we'll distribute it via internet to all of our members, because there's certainly awesome programs that I think they might want to look at and consider. So thank you for the idea, Teresa.
Maybe what we could do then is, and my colleague can join in anytime. I mean, we surely don't have all the answers, in which we're going to be able to respond, quickly to some of the resolutions that you've shared with us, policies at least that you'd like to be able to see. But there are some that I think maybe we can actually start the conversation, and I hope that we can continue with the conversation. And it's many times in the legislature, drafting of legislation normally comes from the community or certain groups, of course, interest groups. And from there, then we would vet, the policy itself, what it is we're trying to do, set up meetings on the side, round tables, then the public hearing that would take place prior to it actually making it to the floor. I like to just, maybe touch on some of the things that you spoke about that are either close, to my heart, or something that I'm personally pursuing. And, just to maybe explain some of the things and maybe where we can go with it. This has been, I know, an issue that DOE has been addressing for many years. Even when I was a school principal, we actually talked about it, whether 16 years of age will be the cut-off years. School principals, the department itself for budgeting, considered it. At one time, there was a discussion. I mean, as a matter of fact, there was legislation actually passed to allow then 18-year-olds up to 21 to remain in our high schools. And it went into effect for a couple of years, and they came back and just said there's just no way that they could continue with it. It was just too mature adult group to have in the school environment. And one of the things that they've done, at least it would help this discussion going, and maybe it's something that the department might even want to consider pursuing, is that we have the JP Torres alternative school, and normally it'll be like middle and high school students to be sent there, have gone through a disciplinary action council, meeting to refer them there, and they'll stay there until they're ready to return to, their home school. Well, the department has changed that now so that all middle schools, because they're realizing the age group again, so they're keeping now the students at the middle school level. But the high school students, these are the ones that are at risk of dropping out. And the whole focus, there's been a reframing of, their mission and what it is that they want to be able to help those students to prevent them, because they are the ones close to the age of 16 who may think then that it's a time then to drop out. And I think it's a reframing, remarketing of, rather than, yes, you're 16, you can drop out, but rather, you're going to be 16, but we're going to work with you and we're going to keep you in, and then we want to send you back to your home school. And I think that that's exactly what, they're trying to do with this one particular program. Many times, too, a lot of our kids don't realize is that right after that, there is GCC who picks up on, these students then transitioning in there. Maybe there might be something that could be addressed. I wrote it down just in case, to have that conversation going maybe with GDOE and GCC, is that because GCC has a presence in all of our public schools, primarily for the trades, but that since it might be a compulsory age, but you can also say that because you're still going to go into another public institution, but higher institution, that it could be saying that, yeah, you can drop out at 16, but guess what? You have no choice. You're mandated now to go and continue at GCC. So, and get some kind of a training, you're right, that would be able to help you get a job. So, and thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's the next level of discussion that we could have. I know you brought up a lot of issues on the veterans, and I think I brought this up with you. I brought it up other veterans group as well, is that, and I'm really happy to hear about Pajuta being the umbrella organization for a lot of nonprofit organizations. But there are many organizations also for the veterans group, and I'm thinking they might need an umbrella organization too to bring them all in. So, because what I'm hearing as well is that all these different organizations are all applying to the same grant. They're competing for the same grant, so they get little of, everyone gets a little of each, and you may not be able to do as much with the little that you get, but of course, as a larger organization and you apply for the larger grant, then I think you'll be able to, accomplish what needs to be done. But, that is something I'd like for us to continue the conversation with. I really seriously am saying this because I've had, some groups come to me, and I don't know if you heard about this group that wanted to do a one-stop for veterans. I'm sure you've heard that, where then a veteran will be able to, they will be able to address all of their concerns all in one place. And I don't know where that is right now, but I know that they are trying to get some grants. They have somebody interested in actually building. I think they even purchased the land, but I really don't know where they're at with it. Persons with disabilities is a real concern, and no one should ever think that they're able-bodied and that they're fine and nothing's ever going to happen to them, because we never know. Something could happen, and that next moment or next day we could be a person with a disability, and I think it's more needs to be done for that. To give you an update, by the way, on healthcare, because that is an issue that everyone's concerned about, and I know APIL, we've brought this up for the last 3 years. We've been working on this. I've done basically everything that I could do at my level. It has to be at the next level. We wrote a grant GCC and I put a grant together to OIA. So whoever's close to Washington, D.C., maybe can let them know that they're not really responding to some of these requests. Is that OIA, of course, rejected our grant, so we weren't able to get the money. We went to Region 9. We went to all the leaders, by the way, the governors and the presidents throughout Micronesia, to get them to use their unspent dollars at the end of the fiscal year to be able to appropriate $100,000 each so that then we can do this feasibility study. That never went through. We contacted HHS. They never responded. But that didn't stop us. So just last week, I had a conversation with the health section of the Asian Development Bank, who now finally somebody's ear is being, tapped here. So they're very interested. They want to take it one step further to go to the South Pacific. So I, asked them to please don't put ours in the back burner just because they want to do it with a larger group. So hopefully we'll make that will have some traction now to do this. There's also a meeting that should be taking place in hopefully April with MILA. MILA is the Mariana Islands Legislatures Association, Guam with the CNMI. So what we're doing is to take common issues, policy issues, and see how we can help each other out. The main themes for that particular meeting, and also for APIL this June 1st to the 3rd, is actually on air and sea transportation and healthcare. So individuals have been invited to make a presence and a presentation on either one of those meetings, and definitely, maybe Sarah, we can let you know about the one for Myla, that you might want to come at least and be able to disseminate the information. And of course, in June. In May, PATA, who is in every one of the islands, will be presenting a study that they're going to do on cruise line industry. They're going to let us know the feasibility of actually making Guam a hub for the cruise line industry. And then they're thinking possibly, we don't know yet, but it's just all in discussion, whether a pilot between maybe Guam and CNMI to see how that will work, and then from there be able to take it out throughout Micronesia, so that it will also be able to help the other islands. And I'm really very happy about the fact that, yes, the power of unity as Pacific Islanders, that we really need one voice. Because you're right, people always look at us as small individual islands, not making a real big difference, having very little or no say-so. But, together, of course, we can have that one voice. And, we're much greater and stronger in that case. And so, we definitely, I know Senator Respicio and I are definitely very interested in that, and we would like to see what we can do to, move that, forward, especially through APIL and through MISES, the Micronesian Chief Executives. I think that's everything that at least I can, There's some ideas, of course, with child care and transportation, especially for our students who may drop out because of the fact that they now have a child to take care of, and that is something we need to discuss with GDOE. There was a proposal many years ago that I had with a school principal, because I was next door to that school principal. I was in middle school and she was a high school, and we were talking about how we could keep our young girls in school, to keep them in school, and how do we get the young boys who are now fathers involved in the child care, and how do we keep them in school without putting them on homeschooling or just having them drop out, by providing child care services. There's something that the university, I think, did at one time, where they themselves would actually have to, as a requirement of bringing their child in, so they come to school, and they must go in and provide services, put in time to take care, like a co-op, exactly. So maybe the time is right to have that conversation again. So most definitely I'd like to continue that conversation as well. So thank you very much for your presentation. Senator, you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, very quickly, the speaker has done an excellent job in enumerating the 34 points that you presented to the legislature this morning. I certainly want to just state that I'm encouraged by Pazuta's philosophy in that we're all in it together. And when President Remengesau gave his opening remarks, he actually turned your theme into a song, which is a song, Only We. And I can't sing as good as he does, but that theme of Only We and the lyrics that follow certainly underscores the importance of what we have to do as a community going forward, and not just in our individual communities, but in our communities as a region. And I was so happy when Pazuta was formed 6 years ago to be the umbrella organization and to take, and as the speaker pointed out, if you just add up all these little resources, at the end you have a big chunk. And if you're going to commit to a holistic approach to solving these huge, massive community problems, we're going to be better off solving those problems if we do this together. And that's your philosophy and your ideology, and some of these 34 points certainly will not have to be translated in legislation, but it's an ideology that legislation should be, all legislation and all policies of the government throughout the region have to be emulated by this. I want to point out your number 30, where you're saying increase and engage congressional support for local and regional causes. This is also absolutely very important. And then what comes to mind is the whole compact impact situation. And, the different islands found themselves in a unique situation with very unique challenges because the federal government did not honor its responsibilities with the compact to reimburse host nations for the impact to health, education, public safety. The Speaker and I have been in APIL for over a decade, and we've always taken the position that our fight regarding the compact impact is not against the different islands or the different islanders. It's really with the United States government. And we're pleased to report that APIL has taken the position that we have to work together to get Congress to own up to its responsibilities with respect to the funding requirements and to mitigate the impacts and to honor all of the tenets of the compact. And so we've come a very long way. In the very beginning, I think I'm sure the speaker can recall, in the very beginning of the whole compact impact challenges, there was a lot of finger pointing. Oh, it's because of you that we're faced with healthcare problems, and our education is impacted, and our public safety is strained, and our judiciaries are backlogged. But I'm pleased to say that over the years that philosophy has changed and the ideology has changed to say we're all brothers and sisters, and those problems were not created by you. Those problems were created because our mother country did not honor the tenets of the compact. And so we've come a long way in that sense. And APIL has passed many resolutions saying, I think it was I don't want to bring up old wounds, but in order to recognize how far we've come and how stronger we are in our relationship, we kind of have to recognize past hurts to say we were here, but now we're here. And where we are today with respect to the compact impact and our relationship throughout Micronesia and throughout the Pacific is absolutely something that we continue to celebrate. Right? And so when you take this issue back to the White House, you have to recognize if the federal government just pays the governments of Guam, CNMI, and Hawaii what those impacts are, our hospital would be a lot better position, and our public safety resources will be there. And so I know that Pazuta has taken the same position, particularly by your policy statement, that to engage congressional support for local and regional causes, and whether it's the compact or whether it's what Speaker Wampat is pursuing, that if we take those same compact monies that's been given to the different regions and give everybody health insurance and make it portable, so when they come to Guam or when they go to Hawaii, they're covered. We said in APIL that, in the beginning they said, well, why do we have to get health insurance when the compact says that we're covered? We go to the different U.S. United States or U.S. different territories, we're covered. But the islanders and their leaders are recognizing that because of the United States' failure to own up to its obligation, your healthcare coverage is in jeopardy. And so the mentality is also changed. We're saying we're better off getting health insurance, so when we go to Guam and we go to GMH or the new hospital, or we go to Hawaii, we have health insurance coverage, as opposed to saying it's covered. Because that strain on the Guam Memorial Hospital it has to continue to be the 800-pound gorilla in the room that we just can't lose sight of. But it's all over the place, and so I'll stop here. Only to say congratulations and thank you for your continued advocacy, and thank you, Therese, for allowing Jolene to give a synopsis of what they've done over the years. And as I said in my opening statement, that this was a product of Pazuta, where you supported that public-private partnership and that public-public partnership between the judiciary and the Department of Education. And over the years, I know that Jolene and her group has been talking to Sarah and your group to emulate these programs throughout Micronesia. And Speaker and I, at one point, we were talking about the technical assistance that the Department of Interior gives to the different islands, that they should earmark some of those technical assistance monies, or your government should pursue some of those technical assistance monies to implement these kinds of character-based educations and play by the rules alone. It takes every single law that the youth and their parents have to know about and puts it in a book form. And there was a group of community members that wrote that book, and as they were looking through these laws that affect the young people, they came across the need to update the laws with respect to bullying, cyberbullying, and sexting. And Vice Speaker Cruz stepped up right away and updated our laws to create a greater awareness. And so feel really good about the work that you're doing. I continue to say that the hardest profession ever is social work. And I respect that. I recognize that in my days at the Department of Youth Affairs, that the challenges always seem greater than what the resources are. But if we just celebrate individual, the lives that you save, and Therese, congratulations on going to Sanctuary, and your days are very difficult. And all you see is, you look in the eyes of families, but rewarding, because you're able to recognize what these accomplishments are, and every accomplishment is an accomplishment that builds upon itself. And so congratulations. Yeah.
Madam Speaker, may I ask that the panelists or those sitting at that table have an opportunity to just make a comment or ask a question?
I was just going to suggest that we still have time. So
sure.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
My name's Jake. Very grateful to be here today, and just wanted to recognize and acknowledge the fantastic opportunity that this has been for me to attend this conference and to see the amazing work that's going on here on your beautiful island. Thank you very much for the opportunity to thank you for the warm reception. It's heartening to see this kind of very intimate dialogue and discourse between legislative body and community serving organization like Pazuta. I just wanted to note, I don't have any questions really. I feel that this has been a really rewarding and very productive dialogue this last couple of days with the conference, but I did want to publicly acknowledge that this is very heartening, and I'm grateful that I did want to publicly congratulate the organization for this set of resolutions that are continuously being worked on, obviously. But I think this is a unique circumstance and a best practice that I feel can be implemented in many other areas and many other groups in the United States, because this, it's very, how do I put this? It is very complex when you look at the challenges that you folks have in this region in dealing with many different jurisdictions, political systems, federal recognition statuses, languages, cultures, and to be able to see the work that Pajuta is doing in bridging some of those barriers and really finding ways to collaborate in meaningful ways to find tangible results is been really eye-opening for me, and I want to congratulate you folks for that work, and definitely a lot of ideas and practices and policy ideas for me personally to take back to the White House initiative in terms of the ways that we can support what's going on here, and you have my personal commitment to do that.
Hello again, Speaker and Senator. My name is Gregory Sandana. As Sarah was kind of alluding to earlier, I was actually born here in Guam. And this is my first time being back since then, so almost 30 years later. And so I can say it's been quite a homecoming to be able to be a part of Pazuta's 6th Nonprofit Congress and now ending the week here at the legislature. So it's definitely a story I'll be telling my parents when I'm back on the mainland. But I just did want to share that I'm also a member of the Executive Committee of the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans, and Pazuta recently joined as a member, and their voice has been an integral part of how we as a national coalition of more than 35 Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander organizations are being a lot more mindful and intentional about our outreach and our engagement and building with communities here in this region. And so there's my commitment to be able to take what I've taken and learned and saw and seen with my own eyes this week back to Washington, D.C. and to push our fellow member organizations, and that these resolutions and policies that are being put forth by Pazuta have the support of our coalition. And we look forward to continued engagement, not only with Pazuta, but with you as a legislature, and any ways that we can continue to partner, and particularly at federal advocacy, but in Washington, D.C., if there's things that we can do to push the White House, Congress, or any of the federal agencies. This is my personal commitment, and also I would say on behalf of APALA and INCAPA that you have our support and our ongoing partnership to ensure the voices of folks in Guam and the Pacific Islands are heard in D.C.
Good morning, Madam Speaker and Senator. Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to say that I've had a great experience participating in this dialogue. And for the most part, I think the real challenge is really how do we come to terms with the different political systems that we have, the different cultures and languages that a lot of times are looked at as barriers for us to come together and work. But I think that as Pacific Islanders, we are the only people who hold the key to removing those barriers, because nobody understands us better than we do ourselves. And I think that we have a greater job as Pacific leaders to bring that into the center of the development of our children, the development of our systems, the systems that we depend on, that it begins to foster and enhance that unity of Pacific Islanders. Because only then will we be recognized in the global community as strong people who are masters of their own destiny. I am one of the things that I appreciate the most about the meeting of the coalition is that we are able to bring to the table the best practices that are identified and practiced in the individual island countries, and learn from each other how to take and learn from each other what builds these greater island countries and a greater Pacific unity as a region. So I want to thank you again for this opportunity and hope that we can continue to learn from the different perspectives of a United States government versus an international developed independent countries, and the different standards, universal standards that are developed and adopted and applied in the individual countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Senator. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Lani from Fiji, and I'm here not as a representative of Fiji civil society, but rather as a representative of Pacific civil society. And when I say the Pacific, and I mean the whole of the Pacific, not just the Northern Pacific, but also the South Pacific. And I'm not as articulate as my colleague and friend Anne, but I just like to echo her sentiments that the importance of standing together as one people and one Pacific. And I was educated at the University of the South Pacific. And the University of the South Pacific, the students have a journal or a newspaper that they produce, and they call it Wansolwara, and it's spelled WANSOLWARA. And what that means, it's a Solomon Island pidgin term, which means that we are one salt water, one sea. We are people of one ocean. And that's the Pacific Ocean, and it's the largest ocean in the world. But unfortunately, for so many years, we've seen it as something that separates us, whereas it connects us. And I apologize, I tend to stand on my soapbox when a mic is close to me. But I feel quite strongly about this. And as Sarah alluded to, Pacific civil society is fortunate that, you know, we're pulling together regardless of our differences in political systems, and we're managing to, Micronesian representatives are managing to get into the room where Pacific leaders are, at the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, where we have the CSO forum pre-PIFS meeting, which Anne was able to attend last year, and the Pacific Islands Development Forum. So I guess I'd like to reiterate from the voice of Pacific Island outside of the Northern Pacific, the importance of having our government leaders there as well. Because you represent, civil society says that we represent the grassroots, or as my colleague John from CNMI likes to say, the taro roots, but government is, our government leaders are elected or appointed by the people, so they should both be at the table. So thank you for the opportunity.
Good morning. I'd like to thank Pajuta and the Nonprofit Congress for making today possible. And I'd like to thank Madam Speaker and Senator Respicio. I'm grateful to be here. I am humbled to be in a room with such wonderful and intelligent people. It is overwhelming to be here and to listen to everything that has been presented. There are several things that catch my attention, most especially the fact that it is so important that all the work that Pajuta and the nonprofits do has to be brought to the policymaking level, as it is being done today. And this to be done in our respective island states or, regions. I am very grateful for the work that APIL has done throughout the region under the leadership of Madam Speaker. And I recognize that the FSM citizens have no choice but to collaborate and work with what we are doing here, because we have become such a huge part of the community here. And I am pleased to know that this effort, and I'm sorry I am so behind, but I just recently heard about the effort on the healthcare, the regional healthcare, which is really a good plan. And as Madam Speaker alluded to, I think it's called the unused fund in the compact that goes back. And unless we use it the following year, so it goes back to the pot, and then it is redistributed to whoever brings up the best proposal. And it is this type of thing that people like us who come in from the islands can take back and actually advocate for and make sure as constituents to our leadership push that they support this type of effort, because it's very important. And as Senator Respicio spoke to us about today, healthcare is no longer just, we're entitled, so we shouldn't have to worry about that. And I'd just like to thank you again for all of this. I am sure that going home is going to be, I'm looking forward to this, because this is something that we bring up during conversations that we have with our leadership. And unfortunately, unlike Guam and perhaps Palau and Saipan, we don't have the use of media. So a lot of us are really not well informed. And I think it makes a difference to do that. And I thank you again, and I look forward to the work that we continue to do as a group. Thank you.
Since Sizu Smasi and Hilisoto Mahmiremi, thank you so much for the opportunity. Guahu si John Oliver Gonzalez, ginin sa Ipan, ginini Sangkatan Island Marianas, manahami mogin si Francis Sablan, no, ever since Lokina ajudantin I non-profit sector is tapago. Si Florine Hofschneider ginin tinian, then si Diana Hokuk Borja ginin tinian lokwe. We are extremely gratified to be amongst a group of advocates passionate about the work they do, and grateful and gratified at the end of the day, because we tried our best. And it is in that vein that I think, as a father, as a husband, as a son of the Pacific Islands, our blue continent, that sometimes I ask myself, is there an end in sight? When can we ever be satisfied with the outcomes that all of us are trying to work towards? And we solve one problem, 3 others pop up. And so I think what resonates there is a greater need to be more strategic. Instead of, I grew up being told, don't study hard, study smart. So if we can be more strategic, smarter in that aspect, I think it would go a long way in mitigating, the stresses that come along with modern day living. There's also another theme that I think I'm going back with, and that is a greater need for innovation and reassessing, reframing what we've done over the past decades. I'm just elated at the idea that we need to, for example, work with the Department of Interior and Congress to say, in evaluating the distribution of funds, how has it worked? For every dollar that we gave out, what was the dividend returns in terms of outcomes and performance and the direct benefits to our people? Has that worked? If so, how so? If not, why not? And I like the idea of maybe working with the Esther Kia Aina to explore that possibility, that to the extent there are overarching common issues of regional transportation barriers, internet regional barriers, healthcare, workforce development, that perhaps we ought to explore, have a working group session with our federal partners of the White House Initiative, ANCAPA, APALA, Acapella, whatever, so we can work together and really get to the nitty-gritty of things and say, what are the issues that bound Micronesia, for example, or the U.S.-affiliated islands? Where can we best, strategize to put our monies for the first year? This is how much money we have, and maybe with solidarity, all the leaders of Micronesia can say, that's not enough. We need to double the pot, okay? All in. and say, you know what, we've got greater needs. These issues, I think, continue to unnecessarily, stress us out because of lack of strategic, smart planning and negotiations and diplomacy. And we have to be consistent at that. So I like that idea. No, ta agun umina umilaw I hafa finapostas and istamano paramona ta tulus igalay data. So I like that idea. And then lastly, also I appreciate the best practice by Ms. Respicio about evidence-based programs. I like for us to bring it up another notch and consider integrating our ancestral practices of cultural evidence. That all of these our society has become superficial. We've transitioned from a subsistence living where life was simple, no stresses, no diabetes, no high blood, to one that has taken us aback. So let's consider the policy making arena where we can slowly but steadfastly integrate gardening, agriculture, fishing, best cultural practices at home. Go back to the maternal instincts, our paternal society instincts as well. Teaching and transferring that cultural knowledge. President, His Excellency President Remengesau alluded to those things. That when we do that, we develop resilient Pacific Islanders who can stand any storm, including what modern society is now coined climate change. So we need to bring those issues to the fore and break it down so all of our societies understand the issues and from there become more united in solidarity. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anybody out there as well would like to? Oh, please come forward, and we have an extra chair here so you can speak into the mic. Sam, do you have any comments? Or well, because he's with the local group, that's the reason why.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Senator Respicio. I was listening to you alluding to the initiative of the healthcare that you have started, and if I understand it correctly, that you have been able to approach the different entities throughout Micronesia, but you didn't really get a lot of support. I believe this is a very important program, and maybe you need to, I suggest that the grassroots people where the nonprofits are, I think we can become a voice to our respective entities, the political leaders. Maybe if we can raise a certain amount of the share for each of the entity, can the government put up their share? I mean, I'm just thinking out different ways that we can become a voice to influence important decision on projects like this. I'm even looking at the high dropout of our students. I was looking at some of the statistics at DOE, and I'm very concerned that when you look at, I was looking at the graphs, the curves and all these, and I try to put it in a picture that parents can look at it. And I was thinking that when they start at kindergarten, it's the size of a basketball, the size of students have enrolled from our FSM community. When they reach to the senior year, it reduced down to the size of a marble, maybe even smaller. I'm not even talking about college graduate. If we are to sustain and be part of the world community, I think this is an important part of our community that we need to look at the education of our children. So I guess what I'm saying, there's a high dropout. And, if I recall right, when I was at GCC, when the compact provides the opportunity for people to work as many jobs as they can, these drastically affected UOG and GCC. The student dropout, and it seems to be a trend that continues on. So I hope that some effort can be done. I believe Sam and I would be very willing to work with our communities to see what can be done to help us to improve the retention of our students to finish their program. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate that. And you're right, that was the one thing that honestly I didn't do. And I thank you, Cindy, as well. And I'm sorry I didn't get your first name. Chris? Oh, K-O-I-S. Okay, thank you very much for your comment as well. And you're right, I have not taken it down to that other level, because I know I've been dealing just with the delegates from APIL and with Mises, which are the chiefs and the governors and the presidents about this regional health insurance. And I was, one of the suggestions I was going to say is that I'm going to say maybe try to connect with the delegates, but now I'm thinking I need to try to connect with the grassroots and the NGOs. And I just wrote a note for myself here that maybe I should, by getting all of your email addresses, and that whatever resolutions that we've passed at APIL, that we can let you know what we're thinking. The hopes always is that when we pass these resolutions, we're supposed to take it back home and then work on, policy at our individual level. And at the time when I was the president, my requirement would be that when the delegates come to our meetings, the very first thing they had to do in their country report was just not tell me what's going on in their country, but tell me what you've done with the resolutions that we passed 6 months ago. And what I found, of course, is that nothing, and since I've made the commitment, the 3 things that I've committed to, and I'll continue to work on so long as I'm in APIL, is the regional health insurance, air and sea transportation. And and I haven't given up on it. It's been over 3 years. We're getting closer. But you're right. If I'd gone maybe to all of you, we might have been able to use that unspent monies, because I worked with everybody. I've been working with leaders only. I called all the ministers of health, and they verbally gave me support. I got letters of support from governors and presidents that I submitted to Washington, and I submitted to even Health and Human Services, leaders basically. But sometimes it's going to have to take the grassroots to put a fire maybe under them. But I appreciate that I'd like to get more information from you about the education that you speak to of our school children, because when I was in APIL, we created an education committee, and it's been really inactive. So we might maybe in this coming June might be where we'll sit and actually discuss a resolution that we can do to reactivate that education committee. And that's going to then go to all the different jurisdictions. Each one of the delegates will take that, home with them. So I appreciate that. If I may, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that, what we've done in APIL, that where you can really all come in and just see how we're able to see some of these resolutions through. And like, for example, I remember when I first came in, one of the biggest issue was that throughout the islands, Anheuser-Busch was pushing this butt nation throughout the islands. I don't know if you've seen it. Butt nation Guam, butt nation Yap, butt nation Chuuk, butt nation Kashrai, all of that throughout the islands. And fortunately, one of our APIL delegates was a medical doctor from Palau. And he actually then introduced a resolution sending a strong message that we as island leaders do not appreciate our islands being labeled as butt nations. Because, the minute we see our name, our island, what is the first thing we want to do? We want to buy it, and then we want to send it off or give them as gifts because, our island is mentioned in that, can. And so we were able to send the resolution out to various organizations. It was picked up by one of our strongest advocates in in the mainland who took it and ran with it, protested, and now they stopped it. So that's how powerful. Then basically when we did that and I saw that, I said, we can be so powerful. Then we can be that one voice when all of us all agree, you see, to do this. The other thing that we did was on shark finning. When it was passed by the Hawaiian delegate, then from there it went to CNMI, then it went to Guam, and one by one, each one of the states and and independent nations and the islands, they started then to introduce their own legislations because everyone's different. But we knew it was a little bit more difficult than the Bud Nation because now we're talking about legislation and how it's different in every island, so island government. So we had to hire an attorney that could practice, who practices rather throughout the islands, and he would work on the legislation and work with the individual legislatures. Plus, we had an advocate like Carlotta and her nonprofit group go and visit all the places, lobby and lobby and lobby until each one of them are able to pass legislation. Domestic violence is one resolution that I had introduced. Unfortunately, it's not yet passed in every one of the islands. Some of them have been just sitting in the committees, and I constantly continue to lobby with my own colleagues and ask when are they going to pass it, but we haven't given up on it, and that's where maybe you can come in and also continue to pursue. Because of all these common issues that we have, and because we're all Pacific Islanders, that was the reason why I felt that in order to give us a stronger base, I introduced us, and having APIL adopted is to call ourselves the Blue Continent. And the more we speak of this, then the more people who know about it and realize and ask who in the world, who makes up this Blue Continent, and we become stronger. And we have APIL, of course, at the legislative level. We have MESIS at the executive level. Now our traditional chiefs have gotten together also to organize themselves throughout, again, the Pacific. So they're making some traction. We have the judiciary have organized themselves throughout, again, the Pacific. We have the auditors throughout the Pacific have organized themselves. So they're now starting to see how powerful we are and how common, the issues are amongst all of our islands, and that's great. And the one new thing that I dropped at your meeting, your opening, is something to really seriously consider. I've been trying. It's a new thing that I've just introduced at our last meeting, and I'll continue to talk about it, that I think could make traction, not necessarily to the extent of what's being done elsewhere, is the Micronesian Union, like the European Union. And there's so many elements of the European Union that we already are doing, but we just haven't united ourselves. So that's going to take, some doing from really MESIS, not from APIL, but so hopefully, they'll pick up on that. But this collaboration, I think, is wonderful. This dialogue that we're having, and I appreciate your comments, and more importantly, is for us to reach out to you. I mean, you're reaching out to us, but we really need to reach out to you as well. Francis, please come up, and you have a microphone here and a seat for you.
Sidus Moses, speakers, and Senator Respicio. I just wanted to add one because I know we're all hungry. But last night at Ross at 1 o'clock in the morning, Lonnie and I were talking as we were waiting for John to buy his comforter. She was mentioning that that we have the concept of fast food. And she goes, there is such a thing as slow food. Do you know about it? I go, no, I've never heard of it. But it relates to the organic foods where those who grow their own vegetables and fruits will prepare dishes, and those dishes will be called the slow foods, because you take time and energy to prepare it, but you share it. And there is an international organization that Lonnie mentioned last night or this morning that gives money to those who want to prepare the slow food, share them with others, and for free. But those who are preparing the slow food will get the money. So that's a concept that we do anyway. We love to cook, we love to share. So why not take that and market it? So I just wanted to mention that, because that's something that exists here in the Pacific that I've never heard about in the Northern Pacific. So I wanted to share that, and thank you, Lonnie, for sharing that with me this morning.
Well, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I had that conversation actually 2 days ago with my daughter, who she was actually interested in in eating healthy. And one of the things that in her research that she found, and because you're right, the concept of fast food, that why a lot of people go there, because it is you run in and you buy it and you take it back. Well, there's actually companies that in India in particular, because and other places, but in India, because they really go out for fast foods, a fast-paced community. So what they do now is that they actually would contract out to housewives, and they would contract out to a particular person to prepare meals for their company, and somebody would come and pick them up. So they have them in these individual stackable bowls, and the tin bowls, you're right. And the fast food, because they would it would be prepared by a housewife. It's home cooked. It's definitely a lot healthier. And one person would deliver the food and to them, so instead of everybody running out to buy their own food. And they're supporting eating, of course, more local foods than ordering these fast foods from vendors. And I'm glad to hear that, Lonnie, so that maybe we should get that name of that international organization too, because we are definitely affected by that, and that's why we have the highest incidence of NCDs. Really more here. The United States is number 6. Number 1 is Nauru. Number 2 is Micronesia. So, as of course, the highest risk of NCDs.
I do want to commend Pazuta, because the meals that were served, throughout the pre-conference were slow food. They were very conscientious in healthy food. So I commend Pazuta for that.
Okay, thank you, Pazuta. Okay, Maurice. I never, it's funny, I see you often. I really always at one time thought you actually live here, only to find out, you don't, but welcome back again.
You look like one of us.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the honorary mention, and Senator, to you and to Pazuta, the board, and the members. I kind of take to heart what you said, because I do feel a level of affection for these islands. It's been an amazing education for me from the first day that I stepped on Guam, and then eventually to some of the other neighboring islands to get to, Saipan and Ponape and, some of the other places that it's just been an education, much like the education that I received as a youth growing up in New York. The only thing I really knew about the world was the 10-block radius that I grew up in the ghetto. And at 17, when I joined the military and was able to travel, I got a new experience to life. And then it broadened my view of the world and the opportunities that were afforded to me. This has enriched my life equally. I share in some of the views, and sometimes I'm kind of cautious in some of the views that I share because people may sometimes interpret them the wrong way. But I feel moved to present a situation that is near and dear to me and my culture. As an African American, there was a gentleman named Willie Lynch was his name. A lot of people may not know the person, but they know Lynch. And actually the term lynching came from Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch was a slave owner. And what Willie Lynch realized was that I could never control slaves through physical restraint. That there had to be a force that was more powerful than shackles or whips or bars to contain slaves. Slave owners were on plantations with them, maybe their 5 or 6 kids, a couple of, hands, with 200 slaves. Much like you will find in our prison systems today. You will find tiers of prisons with 200 inmates and 2 guards. Really, there has to be some other forces to contain that environment besides the little nightstick that you got on the side of your belt. Willie Lynch gave a speech that you can go online and look up, the Willie Lynch speech, and what he did was teach other slave owners how to control slaves. And what he did was teach them about division, how to separate, how to conquer by division, to put light-skinned slaves against dark-skinned slaves, to put slaves who worked in the fields versus the slaves who worked in the house. And in essence, I see a correlation of what has happened amongst these islands. Through division, we've created, or this world, or the United States, or every other entity that has crossed these waters to come and invade this land, inhabit this land, occupy this land, reoccupy it, has further traumatized the people of these islands. So your talk about a blue continent, about a unity, about a oneness is really the answer to most of your problems. Because the division pits people against each other, and if you're always constantly against each other, you will never be able to see what the real problem is. And the other piece to that equation is that once I can get you divided, I can give you something to appease you. Okay? And often that is crumbs. And I am oftentimes distraught in the compensation, the recognition, the supports that are provided to these islands in comparison to the sacrifice of the people of these islands. Your political stances, your use of your land and everything else, that our government has no problem coming in using, taking ownership of, without fair compensation. Once I can do that, I can give you a handout that will provide a means for people to survive, but never really to progress, never really to accumulate wealth, never to be, in a position of power and authority. And the real answer to that is to push away from some of it. I know nobody wants to live in the Stone Ages anymore. That's not a realistic, expectation. But there is a way to bridge that divide through the conversations that are happening right here. And I've been at probably all 6 of the nonprofit congresses now. I think I may have missed one. Okay, and I've watched some of the other unifying events of these islands, and it's moving in the right direction. Only thing that I would ask is that please don't lose momentum. I try to sit in the background because I don't want to ever come across as part of the establishment that has helped impose some of these sanctions and barriers, to the islands. I really want to try to be of help however I can. But I also, and again, thank you, Speaker, I also realize I am not this island. I realize that I am not culturally connected to this island. But my heart is connected to this island because I think that we share a lot of the similar plights. And I'm not even of the islands. It should be a whole lot easier to embrace somebody from Palau, from Pohnpei, from Kosarai, from Chuuk, from Yap than it is to embrace me. Unfortunately, societies have always found somebody to hold their thumb down on. So if you hold your thumb down on me, I usually will turn to the person next to me and hold my thumb down on them. And once we can get past that, as an island nation, I think that you can do some really amazing things. Come a long way. But it really is going to take the spirit in which I'm hearing about unity, letting the water be the connection instead of the divider, having one voice. You know, the strength in West Care right now as an organization is because when I go to Washington, D.C., we're in 17 states. Okay, so when I bring a voice, I'm bringing a voice of all my political figures from those 17 states. And now with the addition of Puerto Rico, you know, we're in 3 territories now. So even with the territories, you know, outside of your blue continent and islands, to even join forces with your other territories to be one voice, because you are all plighted and disproportionately viewed from a political stance. But your unified voice will give you more leverage than any single voice of Guam, you know, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands independently. So, you know, I was trying to sit in the back and just be quiet, but Sarah kept looking at me like, you know, I had an obligation. So I thank you. I thank you for allowing me to be a part of everything of this island. I appreciate each and every last one of you, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. So, Sarah, closing words before we go out there and have something, refreshments for everyone here.
I especially appreciate the comments made by Jake as an observer, and when he said that this is truly a best practice, and that is when the nonprofits and the CSOs have an opportunity to have such a very candid and a very, I think, truthful, forthright conversation with our policymakers. It's incredible, it's amazing, it's awesome. And if we can now take the energy that we've experienced this last few days, and especially this afternoon or this morning, and take it to the next level and operationalize it and put it into constructive action, that we can then report next year when I sit in front of you, that I'll be able to say, you know what, these are the things that happen from all these different entities. Because there's really a lot of good things that are happening, and we need to do a better job at documenting and articulating them and sharing them. So I really want to thank you for always, Madam Speaker and Senator Rory and some of the other legislators here on Guam and the members of APIL that have truly embraced us and listened to us. And I'll tell you, we talk about this all the time. We say APIL, our legislators, act much differently than sometimes some of our other folks that we have to deal with at that higher level of government and in the community. I want to end with a comment that President Mengesau said last night that was very inspiring and encouraging for me. And he said, as a political leader, not only in the Republic of Palau but throughout the region, his observation and experience that little really can be done from the top when it's imposed down, and that the real strength of sustainability and of real effort being realized and our dreams and hopes coming to fruition is when it comes from the people and upwards towards the politicals. So I think that realization has again come to us, and I know you said it, Speaker, today, that you were reminded of that. We're reminded of it, and we're encouraged by the words that you've shared and all of our partners here, and we just thank you very much for your hospitality and your receptiveness. Sidus Masi.
You're very welcome. So this will conclude then our roundtable discussion on the 6th nonprofit Congress resolutions on policies before the Guam legislature. So this meeting is adjourned.